1946. The Second World War has just ended, and the United States is already sending a scientific expedition to Antarctica, led by the experienced polar explorer Richard Byrd. Only the ships are selected in a strange way. An aircraft carrier, 2 destroyers, and a landing ship carry 4,000 soldiers to the South Pole, including the legendary American Marines. But why do such military forces need a scientific mission? The American squadron was attacked by equipment that no one knew about. Aircraft of a new design in the form of flying saucers, fast-moving ships, and underwater boats that could not be caught. The SS, the Black Order. The activities of its secret units are full of unsolved mysteries. Is it true that Antarctica has become the last refuge for the Nazis? And in the eternal cold of the South Pole, are the underground bunkers of the SS hidden? Was the entire history of Antarctica invented after the war? Is it true that the ancient magic artifacts collected by the SS and disappeared after 1945 are kept there today? They believed that with the help of these symbols, they could somehow change history. If they found this artifact, they would win the Second World War. What was behind the mysticism of the leaders of the Third Reich? Faith? Madness? Or pragmatism? We see archaic beliefs, faith in the cult of blood and soil. They tried to make a lightning bolt out of electricity. The Third Reich fell in 1945. Hitler's corpse had long been buried in an unnamed grave. But the mysterious secrets of the SS continue to live, because this is a person-hating, necrophilic story. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe was engulfed by a boom of mysticism. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche announced that God had died. The traditional Christian church was rapidly losing its parishioners. Millions of people of different races were fond of astrology and tarot cards, magic, and spiritism. The elite, politicians, bankers, military leaders, large bourgeois, and aristocrats entered secret spiritual societies. They were looking for a new truth, available only to the chosen ones. The whole world was experiencing a kind of global crisis, which eventually resulted in the First World War and revolutions throughout Europe. When the system collapses and there is no support, people look for a kind of sedative, through mysticism, through attempts to find purpose, to distract themselves from reality. In those days, young artist Adolf Hitler eagerly read boulevard magazines filled with anti-Semitic articles and theories about the upper class. Then he decided to join one of the secret societies, the Duma. The leaders of this society organized their own political party, in which Hitler was given a special role. They encouraged people to follow Hitler. They claimed to have dedicated him to secret teachings, opened centers of vision for him, and gave him ways to communicate with mysterious forces. According to some sources, his teachers developed the paranormal abilities of the future Führer. They shared sacred knowledge of controlling people. They taught him how to control the masses. When he gave speeches, he helped himself with his hands, gestures, and voice intonation. He knew what topics to raise for each audience, which pain points to touch, and where to focus attention. All of this contributed to his influence. Perhaps this, too, became mysticism. Mysticism may have been secondary, but he believed in himself. He trained his oratory skills, practiced in front of a mirror, and perfected his speech. In any case, there was something mystical in the way Hitler influenced crowds. Seas of people stretched to the horizon. They screamed with delight and fainted when they saw him. It was very difficult to hold on to independent views inside such crowds. In 1921, Hitler was declared head of the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. For years later, he created the SS, an organization with wide powers designed to solve the Führer's problems in any area, from practical matters to mysticism. In the Nazi leadership, Hitler, Göring, and many others had participated in the First World War and considered themselves offended and humiliated. They were searching for an answer to how to revive the country. It was a transfer of mystical ideas from boulevard magazines that Hitler had read. According to them, millions of years ago, a highly spiritual and physically perfect Aryan race lived on Earth. The Aryan race was seen as a distant progeny, something that had to be returned to. The Aryan civilization supposedly existed in neither Atlantis nor Antarctica, which was described as a flourishing paradise at the time. It was believed to have reached the pinnacle of technological development, but lost its greatness and perished due to the mixing of superhumans with non-humans. Hitler became deeply attached to this racial theory. It marked the entrance into a world of nationalism, where one nation was chosen as master over others. The Nazis claimed that Germans were direct descendants of Aryan superhumans, and many Germans rushed to believe it. The solemn parades of the new Aryans were meant to convince the masses of the sincerity and greatness of this new faith. They wore coats with crosses and pseudo-helmets, followed by girls in wreaths of green leaves. All of this was intertwined with mysticism and attempts to evoke spirits believed to possess higher knowledge. The Nazis claimed that Germans could become superhumans again, but only by eliminating the influence of enemies and non-humans. This idea was admired by many Germans in the 1930s. A few years later, it led to the catastrophe of World War and the genocide of many nations. The Nazis began purging the nation immediately after coming to power. Symbolic book burnings, considered the first mystical ritual, were held on May 10, 1933. They recreated ancient customs of nighttime bonfires, burning scourges in flames, and marching with choirs. At midnight, fire was symbolically offered to the evil spirits of the past. It was presented as a great gesture, meant to show the world that the phoenix of a new spirit was rising over Germany. In May 1933, works by Erich Maria Remarque, Jack London, Fyodor Dostoevsky, and Albert Einstein were burned and declared harmful. According to the Nazis, 25,000 people were affected. From that point on, only true Aryan ideas were valued in Germany. Even physics and mathematics were divided into German and wrong. The Nazis were irrational. They rejected science and embraced archaic beliefs, including the cult of blood and soil. Later, even Christ was declared an Aryan. Ideally, citizens of the Third Reich were expected to abandon Christianity completely. Their only faith was to be National Socialism. Hitler was equated with God. The Führer was always right. The SS became the main guardians of this new religion. The organization's headquarters was located in Wilsburg Castle. Wilsburg Castle was declared the spiritual center of the SS. It stood in the east as a symbolic fortress against supposed barbaric invasions. According to legend, ancient Germans once made sacrifices to pagan gods there. In the Middle Ages, witches were believed to have lived there. It was considered an ideal place for mysticism. The head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, Hitler's right-hand man, believed in reincarnation and black magic. He transformed the castle into a spiritual citadel of Nazism. Himmler sincerely believed in these ideas. Given his personality, it came naturally to him. Wilsburg functioned like an SS monastery. Once a year, Himmler held secret meetings of the leadership there. Members of the highest ranks gathered to practice spiritual concentration. These meetings took place in a banquet hall and resembled religious services, complete with drinks and rituals. Meditations and other spiritual exercises were conducted. The floor of the hall was decorated with a 12-pointed swastika, known today as the Black Sun. It symbolized the energy of the reborn Aryan race. It was believed that meditating on the Black Sun helped awaken extrasensory abilities. There were meetings at a round table in Wilsberg, where 12 groups of leaders sat in a circle. These gatherings contained references to the legend of King Arthur. For the mystically inclined Himmler, King Arthur, according to British legends, was considered an Aryan ruler. Although the Reichsfuhrer was deeply involved in state affairs related to intelligence, the Gestapo, concentration camps, and SS troops, he carefully studied European epics, from the German legend of the Nibelungs to the Finnish Kalevala. Legends were treated not as myths, but as historical chronicles. The enlightened called the SS the Black Order. This name was linked to the black SS uniform, which they regarded as ritual clothing. The skull and crossbones on their caps symbolized victory over death. It was an elite society that was very difficult to enter. There were strict rules for belonging. Some believed in the ideology, others did not, but no one was given a choice. 2 silver runes in the shape of lightning bolts shone on their insignia. They were believed to guarantee the help of the pagan god Thor. The rune of Tawaz, dedicated to the god of war, was tattooed under the left shoulder. It was believed to make the warrior invincible. The mixing of pagan and Christian symbols did not disturb SS members. Everything coexisted within their system. Similar contradictions can still be seen today in parts of Africa and Asia, where people use modern technology while still practicing ancient rituals and even human sacrifices. The SS represented a similar phenomenon in Europe. The main magical attribute of the SS was the Silver Death's head ring. It was invented by Karl Maria Willigut, an Austrian esotericist. He claimed descent not from Christ or Mary Magdalene, but from ancient mythical ancestors. Willigut also claimed that 200,000 years ago, the ancestors of Germans, giant beings, descended to Earth from the moon. These stories impressed Himmler so much that he granted Willigut the rank of SS Brigadier and made him his chief advisor on early German history. Many considered Willigut mentally unstable. He had been treated in a clinic, but was never cured. Eventually, Himmler realized this and dismissed him. Nevertheless, Himmler continued distributing the rings invented by Willigut to SS officers. They were believed to possess special powers. If the owner died in battle, comrades were obligated to prevent the ring from falling into enemy hands. In 1935, the SS created an organization called Ahnenerbe to study ancestral heritage. It quickly grew into a large scientific network with dozens of research institutes. Its main task was to prove the reality of Aryan myths. Without this, Nazi ideology would have collapsed. The organization was led by ethnologist Hermann Wirth. He refined racist theories, claiming that Germans, Austrians, Baltics, and Scandinavians were descendants of mythical Aryans and were physically and intellectually superior to other nations. The ideology proclaimed that Aryans were a nation of masters who must control or eliminate other peoples. Many academic colleagues considered Wirth a charlatan, but the Nazis viewed him as a genius. Himmler recruited scientists into Ahnenerbe mainly from those rejected by academic institutions. He selected researchers who had been expelled or marginalized. As a result, many members lacked proper scientific credibility and found it easier to invent theories than to conduct real research. Scientists of Annerb argued that it was the Germans, not the peoples of the ancient East, who were the first to develop complex agriculture, master metallurgy, learn crafts, and create writing. They claimed that ancient Rome was founded by Aryans, and that even the monuments of the Sumerians and the Incas were artifacts of Aryan civilization. They pointed to museums and excavations as proof, claiming that Aryan ancestors were present everywhere, and using this to erase feelings of inferiority. According to Nazi ideology, the German people had the right to rule the world. As descendants of the Aryans, they were permitted to kill under the leadership of SS knights, politicians, bankers, military leaders, and mystical societies. This was presented as a war of ideologies and races. On one side stood National Socialism, based on the values of German blood. On the other side were millions of people portrayed as enemies, supposedly capable only of violence, without mercy. The plans of the Third Reich were grandiose: to destroy the inferiority complex and recreate the Aryan nation. They believed they had to conquer the entire world. Under SS control, experimental Aryan villages were built in Roman style. Only racially correct residents were selected, and specially bred cattle were imported. After several generations, a society of blonde, blue-eyed, ideal citizens was expected to emerge. For almost 10 years, a special department studied documents on the mass burning of witches in medieval Germany. Nazi scientists even accused the Church of genocide against the German people, claiming that priests had deliberately destroyed the supposed superpowers of Aryan descendants. At the same time, a witches' library was created, and Himmler proudly claimed descent from practitioners of witchcraft. In June 1936, an expedition traveled to remote Finnish forests to record ritual hymns of local witches on tape recorders. This work was highly praised by Himmler. The Nazis intended to use the magical practices of different peoples to develop psychological techniques for controlling and manipulating minds. Despite the mysticism, many goals were practical. Hitler did not tolerate fantasies without tangible results. The most important and strictly secret task was the search for technological secrets of the ancient Aryan civilization. According to Himmler, these secrets were hidden in myths and legends, disguised as relics and artifacts. They believed that finding such an artifact would give them a weapon more powerful than rockets or even nuclear bombs. One of the main Christian relics, the Holy Grail, was believed to be the cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper and in which his blood was collected. According to legend, anyone who drank from the Grail would become immortal. In 1933, an SS officer and archaeologist, Otto Rahn, began searching for the Grail with Himmler's approval, while publicly questioning the legend. Some Nazis rejected the Grail as a Christian symbol, viewing Christianity as a religion that had deceived the German people. However, others believed the Grail was a relic of pre-Christian beliefs. Under different names, it appeared in ancient myths as a source of immense power and even a gateway to other worlds. In this form, it seemed useful to the Nazis. With Himmler's support, Otto Rahn searched for the Grail in the French Pyrenees at Mount Montségur, where the fortress of the Cathars once stood. The Cathars, a medieval religious sect, were believed to possess secret knowledge. Ron believed this knowledge had been inherited from ancient Aryans. It supposedly gave the Cathars fearlessness in the face of death. When their fortress fell in the 13th century, they were burned but never revealed where the Grail was hidden. Did Otto Ron manage to solve this mystery? Something was packed into a box at the excavation site and taken to Germany, to Himmler's collection. However, no one knew what it contained. In 1937, Ron unexpectedly resigned from his position in Annenberg and tried to leave the SS. A few months later, he was found dead in the mountains. It remains unclear whether he committed suicide by jumping into an abyss, carried out a ritual suicide, or was eliminated. Before the beginning of the Second World War, he died, taking all his secrets with him. In 1938, the head of the SS found a new favorite among scientists, SS Sturmbannführer Ernst Schaefer. His main project was an expedition to Tibet. Himmler, who believed in reincarnation and communication with the souls of the dead, was deeply interested in the secret knowledge of Tibetan lamas and their paranormal abilities. Telekinesis, telepathy, and especially the ability to contact unknown civilizations fascinated him. He dreamed of conquering the world with superweapons based on such powers. The Tibetans were believed to possess knowledge that Europeans did not have. However, they were reluctant to cooperate, fearing that information leaks would turn Tibet into a colony, as it happened to India under British rule. Therefore, Himmler declared that the main goal of the Tibetan expedition was to search for representatives of the ancient Aryan race, supposedly preserved in remote mountain regions. The Tibetans had long been isolated from the rest of the world. The Germans believed this made Tibet a place where a population had developed without racial mixing. They claimed that Tibetan blood was Aryan. Large-scale studies were conducted to determine how closely Tibetans matched Nazi racial theories. Some Tibetans themselves believed they belonged to a higher race. The expedition carried out detailed anthropometric measurements of hundreds of people and concluded that Tibet was the cradle of the Aryans. German scientists also copied ancient manuscripts, filmed secret rituals, and even opened graves. However, these anthropological and ethnographic studies served mainly as a cover for unscientific and political objectives. Scouts used the expedition to study maps, establish contacts with local elites, and gather strategic information for future use. Folklore and cultural research provided a convenient excuse for their movements. As a result, unofficial diplomatic relations were established between Berlin and Lhasa. Tibetan leaders even agreed to provide the Third Reich with special spiritual support. The expedition set up a radio connection between Lhasa and Berlin. Himmler could supposedly consult local spiritual leaders about his decisions. But this was not enough for him. He wanted to locate the mythical land of happiness, Shambhala. Some denied that the expedition searched for Shambhala at all, claiming it was never mentioned in Schaefer's diaries. However, the diaries did mention a statue called the Iron Man, which Tibetan legends described as the key to this mysterious land. It was a small sculpture, about 24 centimeters tall. Research later showed that it was made from fragments of a meteorite. When the expedition returned, Himmler personally welcomed the aircraft. The Iron Man statue was placed in the treasury of Wilsberg Castle. In 1945, it disappeared. It may have been transported back to Tibet by an expedition led by SS Obersturmbannführer Rolf Hohn. This mission was highly secret. It is believed that Hohn was ordered to penetrate Shambhala and ask its rulers for help. According to legend, they controlled time itself, which meant they could allow the Nazis to return to the past, correct their mistakes, and win the war. In April 1945, Hohn's expedition descended into one of the Tibetan caves and disappeared forever. At the end of 1938, when Nazi leaders were still full of hope for world conquest, a German expedition led by polar explorer Alfred Richer sailed toward the shores of Antarctica aboard the ship Schwabenland. Researchers believe that this expedition was one of the most significant events in the mystical history of the Third Reich. It was initiated by Hermann Göring, a man who had little interest in mysticism and was known as a realist. The expedition was well equipped. The polar explorers even had an aircraft at their disposal, with which they flew over nearly 600,000 square kilometers of Antarctica and took 11,000 photographs. Every 25 kilometers, they dropped metal markers bearing swastika symbols. As a result, the Third Reich claimed territories in Antarctica several times larger than Germany itself. For a world power, such expansion was considered prestigious. Thus, the expedition achieved its official goal. But was that its main purpose? Some claimed that the German submarine fleet had built an impregnable fortress for Hitler at the edge of the earth. What fortress was this referring to? What edge of the earth was meant? The Germans did have their own bases, including in areas such as Franz Josef Land and other remote regions. They regularly visited these bases. However, according to official documents, no expeditions were sent to the South Pole after 1939. It was considered unrealistic to travel from Germany to Antarctica during wartime. Nevertheless, some American and German researchers, citing closed Soviet archives, claim that between 1939 and 1945 the Germans continued to travel to Antarctica. These missions were allegedly conducted under the highest level of secrecy. According to this theory, an impregnable polar fortress was built in Antarctica, in the region known as Queen Maud Land. This underground base was called New Swabia. Supporters of this idea argue that the climate there is milder than in other parts of Antarctica. They claim that many underground tunnels were discovered, allowing the construction of an underground city. Critics question how such a base could have been built, requiring thousands of tons of concrete and enormous fuel supplies. It is assumed that energy and heat were provided by a unique wind generator invented by Victor Schauberger, sometimes called the Austrian Tesla. All other supplies were allegedly delivered by cargo submarines. Some claim that refueling submarines were lost by 1943, making sustained operations impossible. According to supporters, the base was completed by January 1945. Dozens of racially ideal boys and girls from the Hitler Youth were supposedly settled there as part of a plan to revive the Aryan race. Later, valuable cargo allegedly arrived, including sacred artifacts from Wilsburg Castle. Much of the base was said to be occupied by secret laboratories and factories producing Wunderwaffe or miracle weapons, which Hitler called weapons of revenge. Hitler claimed that these weapons would change the course of the war. It remains unknown what he meant by this. It could have referred to nuclear weapons, cruise missiles, guided bombs, or something more Eichel, supposedly based on technologies of unknown civilizations uncovered by Ahnenerbe research. The Nazis did actively develop advanced weapons. They experimented with electrical weapons, jet aircraft such as the Messerschmitt, and missile technology. The V-weapons led to rapid technological advances that shaped future military development. According to some sources, the Antarctic base may have existed for 10 to 15 years, although there is no definitive evidence. Soon after the fall of the Third Reich, in the summer of 1945, German submarines U-977 and U-530 arrived on the shores of Argentina. Their crews voluntarily surrendered to authorities. It is not known who exactly arrived, because their faces were hidden by masks. It is known that after the war, there existed a secret German structure that helped SS officers escape from Western Europe. Some believe that among those who fled were not only SS members, but also their leaders and even Hitler himself, and that the bodies found in the Reich Chancellery belonged to doubles. Others argue that the entire story about Antarctica was invented after the war. One author wrote a book called Swastika in the Ice, which became the basis of this myth. The book contains no verified facts. The author claimed that his information came from an SS officer who, in reality, never existed. Rumors about Hitler's fortress in Antarctica, nevertheless, worried American intelligence services. In 1946, they launched Operation High Jump, sending a naval expedition to the South Pole under the command of Rear Admiral Richard Byrd. The expedition returned 3 months earlier than planned, having suffered losses in equipment and personnel. Some claim that as the American squadron approached the supposed German base, it was attacked by unknown technology. Flying saucer-shaped aircraft, fast ships, and uncatchable submarines. In the 1990s, a so-called secret diary of Richard Byrd was published. It described meetings with strange creatures, blue-eyed giants, and flying saucers marked with swastikas. According to some sources, Byrd later lost his sanity or committed suicide and disappeared from public life. Official science considers the diary a falsification. The U.S. government has never fully disclosed the results of the 1946 expedition. Ordinary explanations often fail to satisfy people. Adding mysticism, Atlantis, flying saucers, and mythical creatures makes stories more attractive and easier to sell. After the war, stories spread about alchemists who had served in the SS. Most turned out to be frauds who tried to deceive Himmler. One such figure claimed he could turn water into gasoline using a secret formula. He was soon sent to a concentration camp. Another promised to produce gold from river sand using paraffin. Although he initially delivered gold to the SS, it was later discovered that he had hidden it beforehand. He was then imprisoned. Many such charlatans were exposed and destroyed. There are always people who claim to offer miraculous scientific solutions, such as living water or supernatural abilities. There were even attempts to teach dogs human-like thinking. A special school selected gifted animals from across Germany, but no telepathic connection was ever established. One dog learned to bark in a way that resembled speech, and an Airedale Terrier named Rolf was trained to type words on a special keyboard. That was the extent of these experiments. Later, attention turned to horses. Himmler ordered research into breeding legendary horses described in epics. He wanted a horse capable of traveling enormous distances surviving on minimal food, and serving as the foundation of a conquest army. What, then, was mystical about this? Nothing. The longer the war with the Soviet Union lasted, the fewer resources Himmler had to test mystical ideas. Hitler demanded that he focus on practical tasks. He could study skulls, take measurements, and conduct research, but there would be no mysticism, no gods, and no pagan fantasies. In 1942, the Reichsfuhrer of the SS opened the Institute for Scientific Research of Military Purpose. Its work had nothing to do with mysticism or alternative medicine. Experiments were conducted to test various vaccines and drugs. Groups of prisoners were divided into control and experimental groups and given different substances to see who survived longer. In reality, this was not genuine science. Prisoners were poisoned with toxic substances, deprived of oxygen in sealed barracks, and kept in ice water until their heart stopped. Women were then forced to warm frozen men with their bodies. These experiments were cynically called revival through animal warmth. All research in concentration camps had purely practical aims. It focused on finding the physical limits of the human body and was later used to help German soldiers and pilots survive extreme conditions. Information about these real experiments later gave rise to legends that the Third Reich had created invincible super soldiers. Supposedly, they had produced true superhumans. The Nuremberg trials of Nazi doctors exposed and disproved these brutal myths. Nevertheless, stories about occult rituals and sacred relics of the so-called Black Order have fascinated people for decades. After the war, many could not understand how such a movement arose in Germany and why millions followed Hitler. To explain it, some invented the idea of mystical forces or higher spirituality guiding them. This explanation is convenient. If everything was driven by supernatural forces, then no one is responsible. In reality, they were ordinary Nazis who were defeated by ordinary people, who raised the banner of victory over the Reichstag. Today, belief in supposed Nazi magical powers gives hope to neo-Nazis. Symbols such as the black sun, runes, and skull emblems are once again used by extremists who imagine themselves as superior beings. This is a hateful, destructive ideology. To justify unlimited cruelty, they place themselves above everyone else. History repeats itself. There is nothing new in it. They wait for mystical power to help them win, but only ordinary death awaits them. Death under the setting black sun.